The Catholic Church didn't start with power, money, or grand cathedrals. It started with a man named Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth, and the guy everyone either loved, hated, or feared. His follower, a ragtag group of fishermen, tax collectors, and ordinary people, believed he was the real deal, the Son of God. After Jesus was crucified in a public, humiliating execution meant to send a message, his followers didn't just scatter. They doubled down. They spread his message across the Roman Empire, even though, back then, being a Christian was pretty much a death sentence. No joke. Early Christians were arrested, tortured, fed to lions for entertainment, and still, they kept going. Imagine trying to build a worldwide movement while literally running for your life. That's how the Catholic Church was born, in blood, bravery, and underground house churches. So here's the thing the movies never show you. The early church was basically an outlaw organization. Roman emperors saw Christianity as a threat, not because of violence or uprisings, but because Christians refused to worship the emperor as a god. That was a huge deal. The Roman Empire ran on the idea that the emperor was practically divine. So when a bunch of stubborn Christians started saying, "Yeah, no thanks," it made the empire furious. Waves of brutal crackdowns followed. Emperor Nero, for example, yeah, the guy who allegedly played the fiddle while Rome burned, used Christians as scapegoats. He blamed them for fires, had them arrested by the thousands, and then tortured them in public just to make an example. But plot twist, the more the empire tried to crush Christianity, the faster it grew. People saw how these believers were willing to die, and it made them curious. What could be so powerful, they wondered, that these people would rather die horribly than give it up? Before long, the underground church became a force the empire couldn't ignore. All right, fast forward a couple hundred years. Christianity is growing, but it's still illegal. Then comes Constantine, the Roman emperor who flips the entire script. The legend goes like this. Before a big battle, Constantine has a dream or vision. He sees a cross in the sky and hears a voice saying, "By this sign you will conquer." So Constantine orders his soldiers to paint Christian symbols on their shields. They win the battle. And Constantine, he's like, all right, maybe there's something to this Jesus guy after all. In 313 AD, Constantine issues the Edict of Milan, officially legalizing Christianity across the empire. Boom. Overnight, the church goes from underground movement to mainstream powerhouse. But here's where it gets messy. With legalization comes politics. Suddenly, bishops and priests aren't just spiritual leaders. They're political players. Wealth starts flowing into the church. Power structures form. And pretty soon, being a bishop in Rome isn't just about faith. It's about controlling huge amounts of land, people, and money. Some of the early leaders tried to stay humble. Others, not so much. This is the moment when the Catholic Church stops being just a spiritual movement and starts becoming an institution. So now the Catholic Church is mainstream, but it's not just a religious group anymore. It's political, it's powerful, and during the Middle Ages, we're talking roughly the 5th to 15th centuries, the church basically becomes the most powerful institution in all of Europe. Like more powerful than kings, more powerful than armies. How? 2 words, fear and faith. See, back then, everyone believed that the church held the keys to heaven and hell. If the church said you were saved, you were saved. If the church said you were damned, well, bad news, buddy. So kings, nobles, peasants, everyone had to play nice with the church. Otherwise, they could get excommunicated. And getting excommunicated wasn't just about religion, it was political suicide. Imagine being a king, but the Pope says, nope, you're out. Suddenly, your enemies have a green light to overthrow you. That's how much control the church had. But, and this is important, not everything was holy and pure behind closed doors. Bribery, power struggles, secret deals, corruption at the highest levels. It was all happening. Some popes lived more like mafia bosses than holy men. There were popes who had mistresses, popes who sold church offices to the highest bidder. This was called simony. And even popes who ordered assassinations. Yeah, not exactly what you'd expect from a group preaching about humility and forgiveness. And just when it seemed like the church couldn't get any more powerful, they found a way. It involved swords, blood, and a whole lot of marketing. It was called the Crusades, but we'll get to that in a second. It's the year 1095. The Holy Land, places like Jerusalem, is under Muslim control. Pope Urban II steps up and says, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if we took it back for Christendom?" And just like that, the First Crusade is born. But Urban doesn't just make it a political campaign. He makes it spiritual. He tells people that if they go on crusade, fight, and die for the cause, their sins will be forgiven. Instant ticket to heaven. For people living in constant fear of damnation, this was the ultimate deal. Thousands sign up. Knights, peasants, even criminals. Some went for faith, others went for the chance to get rich or famous. What followed was centuries of brutal warfare, crusade after crusade after crusade. The Crusaders did take Jerusalem at one point, but they also slaughtered entire cities, including Christians who happened to be the wrong type of Christian. And the craziest part? Some of the later Crusades didn't even bother with the Holy Land. Crusaders turned on other European cities just to grab loot and power. One crusade famously attacked Constantinople, another Christian city, and sacked it so badly that historians say the city never fully recovered. So yeah, the Crusades weren't just holy wars. They were about money, land, politics, and a whole lot of broken promises. And if you think that was dark, wait until you hear about what happened next. All right, so buckle up because this part, it's not for the faint of heart. As the church grew more powerful, they became obsessed with one thing: control. Controlling what people believed, controlling what people said, controlling what people read. And so the Inquisition was born. It started around the 12th century and kicked into high gear in places like Spain and France. The goal? Root out heresy. Heresy basically meant any belief the church didn't like. Question the Pope? Heresy. Suggest maybe the Bible should be in the language people actually speak? Heresy. Believe that you could talk directly to God without a priest? Heresy. And the punishments? Brutal. Torture, imprisonment, public executions. People were burned at the stake, sometimes on nothing more than rumor. The Spanish Inquisition, in particular, became infamous for its secret trials and horrific torture methods designed to save souls by breaking bodies. And here's a creepy thought. Many victims weren't even guilty of anything. Neighbors would accuse each other just to settle grudges. And guess what? If you were accused, your property could be seized by the church. Yeah, follow the money. And it's pretty clear the Inquisition wasn't just about protecting theology. It was about consolidating wealth and power, no matter the cost. And just when it looked like the church's grip couldn't get any tighter, a revolution started brewing. A revolution that would tear the church apart from the inside. The Reformation was coming. All right, so here's where the whole system starts to crack. By the early 1500s, a lot of people, even inside the church, are fed up. Fed up with corruption, fed up with priests selling indulgences, basically buying your way out of hell. Fed up with popes living like kings while regular folks starve. Enter Martin Luther. Luther was a German monk who wasn't looking to start a revolution. He just wanted reform. He wanted the church to actually follow the Bible. In 1517, Luther writes a list of complaints, famously known as the 95 Theses, and nails them to the church door in Wittenberg. That act, it's like lighting a match in a room full of dynamite. Word spreads fast thanks to this brand new invention called the printing press. You don't need a priest to get to God. You don't have to pay for forgiveness. The Bible, not the Pope, is the ultimate authority. The church freaks out. They put Luther on trial. They call him a heretic. But by then, it's too late. The Protestant Reformation has begun. And it doesn't just create a new branch of Christianity, it fractures Europe. Wars break out. Kingdoms fall. New churches rise. And for the first time in over 1,000 years, the Catholic Church has serious competition. But did the church adapt and fix its mistakes immediately? Not exactly. All right, so after the Protestant Reformation blows up, the Catholic Church realizes it's got to make some changes. They launch what's called the Counter-Reformation. The church tightens up its teachings, They clean up some corruption. They establish new religious orders, like the Jesuits, who focus on education and missionary work. And in some places, it works. The church wins back some followers, but, and this is a big but, the church still carries its old habits into the future. Fast forward a few centuries, and guess what? Scandals rear their ugly heads again. There are cover-ups, financial scandals, power struggles inside the Vatican, and the biggest scandal of all, the widespread sexual abuse crisis, rocks the church to its core. Victims come forward, documents surface showing cover-ups that stretch back decades, even centuries. Lawsuits pile up, trust erodes. Faithful Catholics around the world are left grappling with how the institution they loved could harbor such evil. Some stay, hoping for change. Others walk away. And today, the church finds itself at a crossroads. Stick with the old ways? Or finally confront its demons? And speaking of crossroads, let's talk about the Catholic Church in the modern world, because it's a wild mix of ancient tradition and surprising revolution. Today, the Catholic Church is a global giant, over 1.3 billion members worldwide. That's about 1 out of every 6 people on earth. But internally, the church is split. On one side, you've got traditionalists, people who believe the church should never, ever change. On the other side, you've got reformers, people pushing for modernization, things like letting priests marry, giving women bigger roles in leadership, fully accepting LGBTQ plus members, making financial transparency a real thing. And here's the real kicker. Even among the hierarchy, the bishops, the cardinals, even the popes, there's disagreement. Pope Francis, for example, has tried to push for a more compassionate, open church. But he's faced massive pushback from conservative forces inside the Vatican itself. It's a full-on ideological battle. Meanwhile, everyday Catholics are left asking, is the church about power? Or about people? About tradition? Or about truth? And honestly, those questions are more alive today than ever before, especially when you start digging into some of the stories the church would rather you forget. All right, let's peel back the curtain even more. There's a lot the official story doesn't mention, like how early Christian women actually held leadership roles before later church councils phased them out, or how political pressures shaped the Bible itself, certain books included, others banned, or the Vatican's secret archives, a massive, closely guarded library of documents stretching back over 1,000 years. What's in there? Only a handful of scholars have ever seen. Or how the church once debated, seriously debated, selling forgiveness as a fundraiser to build St. Peter's Basilica. Or how some saints we revere today were once seen as dangerous radicals. The truth is, the history of the Catholic Church isn't a clean, simple story. It's messy, it's complicated, it's full of heroes and villains. Sometimes in the same person, it's a human story of faith, fear, ambition, and everything in between. And knowing that history doesn't have to destroy faith. In a weird way, it makes it more real, because it shows that even when institutions fail, faith, hope, and love still find a way to survive. So, what's the takeaway? Well, if you've made it this far, you already know. The Catholic Church isn't just stained glass windows in Sunday Mass. It's a 2,000-year roller coaster ride through some of humanity's best and worst moments. It survived emperors, invasions, plagues, revolutions, and scandals, and it's still here. That doesn't mean we should excuse the dark parts. Far from it. Understanding the full story, the real story, matters, because it lets us see the difference between faith and the flawed institutions that try to control it. Between the message of love and the mess of human ambition, and maybe, just maybe, it helps us imagine a better way forward, one rooted not in fear or control or corruption, but in something deeper, something stronger, something real. Thanks for watching. God bless you. Amen.